For this session about the non-employee risk management API capabilities for profile management. So I'm Yannick Béot. I'm a solution engineer at SailPoint. I'm actually replacing Derek Akbard, another a colleague at SailPoint. We couldn't make it, and but we are prepare everything. So he submitted the session. He has prepared the slides. He has prepared the tenant. So I think it's fair to mention his name in this presentation. So Derek, we have a quick introduction about this API, and then we'll see some simple use case to use the API, and we'll see about a more complex use case around profile management. So first thing is about our documentation. So of course the API, non-employee risk management API, is documented on our developer.sailpoint.com website. So I'll give you a quick tour like Colin made yesterday for ISC's API. And we also have a Postman collection for this API. So if we want to look at this API, so under the documentation, under Identity Security Cloud, you will find NERM, and here you will find the documentation of all endpoints. So especially, for instance, to manage profiles, as we will use it today. But for instance, if you want to manage users or other stuff, you can have here all the endpoints you want. Also, one important thing is to manage the authentication to this API. So here you have the exact instructions to create an API key. So it's something I will show you later, and how to use this API key. So basically, it's to put the API key as a bearer token in the authorization header. So as I said, you also have in our website, in our developer.sailpoint website, the collection. So you can from there fork this collection and put it into your own workspace, so you can use it. So once you've done that, it will appear in Postman, of course. So you can see here that you have all these endpoints already fixed. Also, this collection is coming with actually free variables. So by default, it's coming with tenant name, base URL, and bearer token. So these are the free collection. So these are defined at the collection level. But as for IAC, we will recommend you to create some environment to store this and not directly on the collection, so you can switch between different environments with Postman. Also, one additional recommendation I will do here is that you use the same environment for NERM's API and for the IAC, your IAC tenant that you may use in conjunction with NERM. So for that, for instance, I've created a template. So you can see here that you would have the tenant name, so company something, for instance. The tenant variable here will concatenate the actual tenant name and something like -POC, so it's something that is needed if you are using some demo hub tenant or something like that. You will have client ID, client secrets, of course. And the bearer token here, so I've renamed the variable bearer token to NE bearer token, for instance, to prefix with non-employee. So I don't have any collusion with IAC bearer token and the non-employee bearer token. So for that, I actually change the variable that is used for the token, for the bearer token. So I'm referencing here the NE bearer token. So that way you can use ISC API, you can use NERM API without switching between environments. So back to my environment. So for this demo, we will use two profile types. So we will use a cost center and we will use vendors. So both these profile types are of a specific attribute. So the name, cost center descriptions, or vendor name and vendor descriptions, and there is also the cost center vendors or vendor cost center, which are relations, which put relations between cost centers and vendors. As an example, as a reference example. Okay. So, as a basic use case, so you usually need to use the API as a single. So we are calling it simple here in this case because we are using only a single API endpoint to do something. And you may need to do something. So if you want to manage some reference profiles, so for instance, if you have some metadata, so for instance, it can be cost centers, it can be vendors, but it could be departments as well, it can be locations, it could be job titles. So these are the kind of data you may have that is available outside NURM, and you want to push to NURM actually, so you can use them on profiles. So to manage these reference profiles, you will use the profile endpoints, as I will show you later. So this is also a good use case for initial data loading. So if you want to load profiles, that being people or that being any reference profile. So at first, if you want to do this initial loading, you can leverage the API to push the data to your tenant. It's interesting to note that some endpoints support to update or to create in bulk. So you have some endpoints that manage bulk operations. So you can send several profiles at a time. Also, one thing worth mentioning is that you can create and update or delete users through the API. So it's a single endpoint API. I won't show you that today, but it's kind of the same principle as for the profile management anyway. So we'll go to some simple use case to explore the profile types and create a new profile, update a new profile. So I will just show you that. So as part of, so as I was telling you, we have created two profile types, so cost centers and vendors. So here we have, this cost center profile type, we have a profile naming based on the cost center name, and we have some duplicate prevention. So we don't create two cost center with the same name here. Again, we have the same, the vendors. So here in this case, we are using the vendor underscore name attribute, but there is no duplicate prevention in this case. We'll get back to that later. So if we look at the list of profiles, so we have here on two vendors, for instance. We have a handful of cost center that are available in the interface. If we look at cost center, so you have this cost center name, the description, and this relation to vendors eventually that is available, and you have a status. So this is how the demo environment has been set up. So now back to the API. So for instance, you have this profile underscore types, which allow you to list profile types. So you have some query params, I would say, that allows you to filter or to paginate stuff. So here we only have two profile types. So from there, you can have the list of profile types. So we find again the vendors and cost centers, and you can see here the ID of this profile type. So this is the same ID. So here, if I'm taking the vendors, you will see that this ID is actually available also in the UI. If you look at the URL, so this you can find the ID again here. Then we can list profiles. So you have query params, and you can also filter on the profile type. So for instance, if we want to list vendors, I can take this ID and replace here the profile type. Sorry. And so you will see that we can list the two vendors that we've seen in the interface. We could also test again the other profile type. So here, if I'm changing it to the cost center profile type ID, you can see here all the profile for all the cost center that are available in the interface. And if we look at this object as it's a single profile, you will find here the ID of the profile, some name, some profile type ID, the status of this profile. I mean, some other system attribute like the updated ad, created ad, and also all the attributes values that we need to use and configure. So now I will show you how we can, for instance, update a profile. So if I took, so for instance, if I go back to the interface and I find a profile, and let's say I'm taking this one, so I will get from the URL the ID, right? So I can do it through the web interface, or I can do it through the API calls. So it's just easy to do that. So I will use this update endpoint, update a profile endpoint, that takes the ID in the URL. So I will update this ID, and in the body you can actually push the attributes you want to update. So for instance, here we can change the status to inactive. We can change the description. So let's say I want to put here new descriptions. And so you don't need to provide the whole payload or all attributes. You just need to put in this update endpoint only the API you want. The attributes you want, sorry. So here we can see that the profile has been updated. So the status is now inactive and the description is now new description. So if we go back to the web UI and I refresh, you can see that now the status has changed and the description has changed as in the interface, in Postman. So now let's create a vendor, for instance. So let's create a profile. So we will use the profile endpoint to create a single profile, and so you need to provide here some mandatory fields like the profile type ID, of course, and you can set over information. So, for instance, you can set the status, and you can set attributes like the vendor name, vendor descriptions. Here in the vendor cost center, you can actually put the ID of the cost center you want for the one you want to create some relation. And if you want to manage multiple values, you can separate the IDs by a small comma. So for instance, if I want to link my new vendor to an existing cost center, I can put here the ID, again coming from the web UI or coming from another query in Postman. I can choose another cost center. Let's this one. And so posting the payload, and now we have a new profile, V14 vendor, with the description and with the relation to the two cost center. So back to the interface, we have now this new vendor, and the relation to the two cost center, CC2 and CC3, that I've chosen just before. So now, talking about more complex use case. So here in this case, we will rely on the workflow engine in NERM. So the idea is to rely on the workflow engines to do more activity, more stuff, I would say, and to be able to do more complex stuff with this API. So, for instance, it's interesting to rely on workflows if you want to do some dependent action. So, for instance, imagine that you want to create in a single call, you want to create first a cost center and then a vendor being linked to this cost center. You can actually call a single a workflow that will take care of this dependency actions, right? And create first the cost center and then create the vendor. So of course you can do that by calling multiple times the profile endpoint, as we have seen. So you can create first the cost center, get its ID from the response, and then use this to prepare the payload for the new vendor and create the vendor. But in that case, the burden of the business logics, is on the REST client side. I would say it will be on your scripts. The business logics is on you. By leveraging the workflow engine, you are pushing the business logic inside NERM to do all the things you need to do. It's also a good way to ensure integrity or insurance in the process and consistency, I would say. So if you design it like this, you can, for instance, use the same workflow to create profiles, either from the UI or from the API, but use the same workflow, so you ensure that you will have all the same business logics in both cases, right? There are also a few activity that can only be triggered within the workflow engine. So for instance, if you are onboarding users and you want to send invites or registrations, there is no API calls to do that. So you need to have some workflow that at some point will have this activity to send invites and send registration. So for that you will need to run a workflow. There are other use cases like attribute builder, where you want to have some increments, and so for that, again, there is no API call for that. You will need to rely on a workflow execution. And finally, you can also rely on workflows to do so deep data validation. So by that I mean that you can, for instance, make some duplicate checks. You can also make some lookups to ensure that the data actually exists. So for instance, instead of mentioning the ID of an existing cost center, you can perhaps provide only the cost center name or the cost center code, and the workflow will take the burden of looking up the cost center based on its code or its name. The idea here is that so the REST client on the client side, you don't need to store the profile IDs. You don't need to do multiple calls to find your cost center based on the name or something like that. Everything is done inside NERM with the workflow engine. So for that, I will show you two use cases. One is to I will show you two complex use cases to manage and create vendors profile. So if we have a quick look at these workflows, so there is this complex example 2 workflow. So this complex example 2 is actually, so first it will check if there is any existing vendor with the same name. So if you remember, there is no constraint, duplication constraint on the vendor profile type. So here we are doing this. and as we can see here, if there is any duplicates for some reason, we can reroute, we can create some approval here. So it means that even though these are APIs, these are machine-to-machine calls, I would say, you can fall back to some interaction with some human actually approving stuff here, or you could have other forms created and things like that. Then we will eventually look up your cost center. We can assign contributors to your vendor, and you can finally create the profile within NURM just by a single API call. So basically, to start the workflow, you will use the workflow_sessions endpoint. So for that, you will need the ID. So the ID, again, is in the URL, so you can find it here. So you can copy-paste here. You will need to provide some requester ID. So I've put here the ID of my user. And you will have all the attributes you need to do that. So for that, so in order to create my vendor, I need the vendor name, I need the vendor description, and I also need the cost center name, so I can look up the cost center in the existing cost center, and before I create the vendor. So if I send this, so I can see that my workflow is triggered. We can follow the activity from the activity menu. And we can see here that a few things, so that my workflow is completed, so that my profile has been created, my V15 has been created. So therefore, if I'm going here, I can now see that V15 exists with the description I've provided, and there is a link to CC1 cost center as I provided this name in my payload. Another example is this second workflow called complex example 3. So in this case, I will actually call two other workflows. So the first workflow will be responsible to create the cost center. So here I'm calling another workflow, a sub-workflow, which is called create center. And I'm passing here a few attributes, so the cost center description and the cost center name, because these are the things I need to create my cost center. And after that, I will call another workflow, which is actually the workflow we just used, so the complex example 2. And for that, I need to pass the vendor name, the vendor description, and the cost center name, as I just did with through Postman. So here I will call the example 3. Again, so I need to pass the proper workflow ID here. And so this time, as we will create a cost center vendor, I need to pass the cost center name and description. So we will create the 16th and the vendor name and description. So here the 16th and the proper description. Again, if we go back to the activity, so we can see here that the parent workflow here is completed. So, and we can see from there that he has created this call to the sub workflows for the create center and for the complex example. So if we click here, we'll go to the activity log. So the cost center workflow has been created. So now it reminds me that I didn't show you this workflow, but this one is pretty simple because it's just a profile create activity. And we can see from there the second sub workflow, so the one we already know about, the complex example 2, that has assigned the contributor and the profile. So now we can see For instance, in the list of vendors, we can see this. If I start from the cost center, we can see now we have the second page, the 16th cost center that exists and that has been created with the proper name and description. And we can see here this vendor with the name, with the description, and with this relation to the cost center. Also, I forgot to mention here that we have with the auto-assign activity, we were able to assign the vendor management role, for instance. So it's an example. So we have this role that is supposed to be able to manage the vendors, for instance. So the auto-assign activity is actually properly assigning the rights, the contributor rights to this profile. So I think that's it, if I'm not missing something. So in this session, we were able to see some example of usage of the name API to properly create profile, to update profiles. We could eventually delete them if we need to. We also shown some advanced use case by leveraging the workflow engine here. So we were able to do more advanced activities like looking over profile by name, assigning rights, or creating several objects in a single call. So again, the business logics remains within them. So thank you for your attention, and see you tomorrow.